Welcome to the Peachtree Podcast. Peachtree Learning Center is a nonprofit in Middle Tennessee dedicated to training and discipling students in all the fine arts to become excellent and skilled in order to spread the kingdom of God into the world of the arts. On this podcast, we will discuss topics designed to encourage, uplift, educate, and equip people to proclaim the kingdom more deeply in their own families and communities.
Hello, and welcome to Peachtree's podcast. Peachtree is rocking and rolling this fall with lots of fun activities and great events coming up. We've had a really great start to our semester in both our locations and feel very blessed that the Lord is smiling on us and our work that we're doing, and we're very grateful for all of our teachers. We've got some new teachers that have been very exciting to add who get the vision and understand the work of God in His kingdom and have come aboard to share that and proclaim that with us. It's always very exciting to find people of like mind who want to come alongside and help and just be a part of it. And we've been very blessed with that this fall with several new people who are actually pouring in at both of our locations and really finding a groove with what God has them here for. And so we're super pumped about all the things that are happening and all the ways that God is going to use Peachtree and the students here to go forth and proclaim His truth. Thinking about all that, I've also been thinking a lot about parenting in general and just seeing families a lot. We definitely see a lot of families come and go, and I love watching children come in and be excited to come to class and then be even more excited when they leave because they can't wait to show mom and dad and sisters and brothers what they had in class, what they learned, or the activity they got to do. But I'm always thinking about just principles that helped us when we were parenting our children, and even the ways I would love to fine-tune that if I could go back in time, which of course we can't. But one of the principles that came home to me through a Bible study when my girls were little was the idea of impressing our children when they're young with rules versus the transition that happens when they have to start internalizing that process. And the picture that I was given was of an exoskeleton versus an endoskeleton. And just in case you don't study science for a living, I'll go back and refresh you on what that is. So an exoskeleton is visible on an animal that only has a soft internal body and does not have internal bones. So an exoskeleton would be something you see on an animal like a lobster or a crawfish or a snail. Those hard structures that they live inside are their skeleton, but they're on the outsides of their body. And sometimes creatures that grow and they're creatures that use exoskeletons, sometimes they have to shed those and grow a whole new one or grow new parts of one as they grow. The exoskeleton itself has to grow to continue to contain the animal. And some animals are just born with what they are going to have, and they literally live in the same exoskeleton for their whole lives. And the opposite of that is an endoskeleton. So it's a bone structure and cartilage structures that are internal to an animal, and so they reside inside the flesh, and you don't see them from the outside. And mammals are obviously the most easily accessible animal to think about. So people, dogs, cats, elephants, all those animals have structure inside. They have skeletal structures inside that help them with balance and help them keep structure to their animal. They basically give shape to the animal. And when I was parenting little children, I realized that I was actually applying an exoskeleton structure. So I was using rules to shape their person from outside. So I enforced things like, you have to hold my hand in the parking lot. You cannot run away from me without holding my hand. Cars can't see you. You have to hold my hand. The child doesn't understand why, but this is an inconvenience they're going to have to put up with. Or you have to say thank you and please. I had many occasions when we let balloons or stickers go by because the child at the time being offered that treat was not going to say thank you. So we just let it go because that was the rule. And they didn't understand the rule, but they were going to abide by it in our home. You have to apologize to your sister for hitting her or knocking her on the head or whatever. You have to touch the shopping cart while you're in the store. You have to be with me in the store. You can't run around the corner or go to another aisle. You can only have 2 pieces of that whole bowl of candy. These are all things that children typically do not want to adhere to, but they have to for their own safety, for their own good, for lots of principles that you want to establish in your home. They have to obey rules. And these are just examples of things that we had in our home. I remember going to Thanksgiving, and it was such a huge, there was always a huge table of desserts. And, it was a big group of people, and there might be 15 different kinds of pies and cakes and treats on the table. But we had a rule that you could only have 2. And so there was this whole judicious process that was applied to figuring out which 2 they were going to try, and even the sharing back and forth so they could actually try more than 2 was something they really thought through hard. But it was a good exercise for them. It taught them a lot about self-limits and about self-imposing discipline, and there was just a lot of value in that. And also the value of not going home completely high on sugar. But as they get older, you graduate to more of an endoskeleton structure. So as they get past the idea of you telling them everything to do, they're going to get to the point where they start making those choices themselves. They look up and they realize they can't walk through the parking lot without holding your hand, or they realize that they, just suddenly turned a corner in a store and you're not there and they have to come back, or they're away from you but they turn down having a candy in class or candy from a friend, or they take it and pocket it and bring it home because they know they've already had their limit for the day, and they start to internalize those structures that you've put in place. And then as fully formed adults, they should have that completely in place. They should be able to make those choices and decisions, certainly those elemental ones, but it helps them graduate into making bigger choices. And they make choices that affect their finances or affect their time management or affect their learning. Even if you're homeschooling, you're always really excited to see them pick up their books and start working at a certain time every day because they know that's the structure that's expected, and they just do that themselves. You don't have to continually enforce that with them. And there's a lot of ways that this can apply, and it's a lot more fluid than I'm describing, but the actual process of exoskeleton structure being applied when you're young, changing to endoskeleton structure is just a picture that I had for that changeover into a more internalized structure of their own so that they could stand on their own 2 feet and they didn't need me to continually be there. And another huge example of this that came to me was that this is exactly how God started training his people. In the beginning, he gave them this huge set of laws and rules, and there were rules about how to wear your clothing and how to put your shoes on, and what you could and couldn't eat, and when you could and couldn't eat it, and how many times you had to go offer sacrifices for your sin or for other people, or for you had to go be healed, and you had all these sacrifices that had to be observed, and feasts that had to be observed, and Sabbath to be observed in a special way. And then there were special Sabbaths and special weeks, and there was a lot of structure involved in the people of Israel's daily lives that God was very meticulous about describing to them in the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy specifically. But what came out of that was relationship, and he was always at work hoping that the structure of the rules would lead them to become more skeletal in their own lives and internalize what he was trying to get them to see. And he always talked about that too. He talked about how he wanted the law to lead them to love him well. He wanted the law to lead their hearts into relationship with him. So it was never about just observing the rules. And that's where the Pharisees went completely off track. And they made it about the rules. And if you observe the rules, then you're in. And if you didn't, then you were out. And they devised special taxes and special punishments and penalties for people who didn't obey the rules. And so on some levels, the people of Israel really lost their way in becoming so caught up in observing the rules that they forgot to look past the rules to the rule giver. And that's what the New Testament is about, right? Like, it's not anymore about us obeying the rules. It's about us needing to internalize the structure of his heart at work in us and his spirit at work in us, so that informs how we live our daily lives. And it informs how we make choices to obey him and to love him and to serve him and to find ways to spread his aroma throughout the world he's given us to live in. You can picture this for your children in their home, and then when they get older and they see what you've done and they can realize that as self-aware humans, you can turn around and also point out that this is how God has raised his people up from the beginning. And now we're in the second age when, the rules aren't nearly as important as the adherence to an internalized skeletal structure that will inform your life. One of the downfalls I think I see a lot is parents who, if you're a parent who finds it very hard to impose structure for whatever reason. Maybe you have guilt over your own life, or you're walking in conviction about things, or maybe you're just tired and it's hard to be consistent. It's very important to remember to understand that children who are not raised with that structure, who don't understand the importance of exoskeleton, part of what that exostructure gives them is stability. And they don't have that inherently. God doesn't give them that when they're born. They don't inherently have the desire to do only good things or the desire to only obey the rules. In fact, we're born the opposite. Jeremiah told us that the heart of man is deceitfully wicked on all levels. Like it's not a good thing. So you first of all have to understand that the spirit of man is not inherently a good seeking spirit. And so your children don't inherently look for good in every level. So your job as a parent, however flawed you are, your job is to teach them that and to teach them why rules are important and need to be obeyed, and then to follow through and be consistent. Because children that are raised without that structure don't ever develop the internalized structure either. And so they become adults who are very wishy-washy or very undisciplined and unself-structured, and it's harder for them to develop that later because they didn't have that first foundational growing period of time. And I think I see young adults walking around without the ability to really understand who they are. They didn't get grounded in the security of knowing someone cared enough about them to make them mind and make them follow the rules. And even if it wasn't convenient or they didn't understand it, those sometimes still have to be obeyed just because the rule is there for a purpose. And that definitely does should drive you to not making arbitrary rules about things that don't have to have rules about them, but decisions about what classes to take or what instrument they're going to play or how they want to spend their time in reading. Those are decisions that should not be left to children in elementary grades. They just shouldn't be left up to them. That's not they don't have any kind of frame of reference. They don't understand long-term ramifications of those choices, and they're going to have to live with those choices. And I have yet to meet an adult who regrets knowing how to play a musical instrument or regrets time spent reading good literature. I've never met one. I've met plenty who wish that they had not had to go through the process or didn't enjoy the learning, but nobody that ever came to play an instrument or read good books that I've found ever come out and said, boy, I wish I didn't spend all the time reading good quality books, or I wish I didn't have such a great vocabulary, or I really wish I didn't have this skill set. People, once you get to be an adult, people turn around and understand and appreciate the effort that went into the parenting that caused you to have that effect. So these are all thoughts that have just kind of been swirling in my head, looking around at ways to maybe just help you understand or help people to think about parenting in fresh ways, and pictures always worked with me. So I'm sharing a picture of this skeleton idea to try to just prompt you into understanding maybe a little deeper what your purpose is, and hopefully to encourage you that your work is super important and you're shaping a human being. You're not shaping a machine or a worker. You're shaping a human life, and you're even pointing them at an eternal life to come, and that is all going to be powered by how you are able to help them understand their purpose when they're little and understand structure and the purpose behind it, so that they always look for that and look for the good structures to live their lives by. Hope this blesses you today. We really hope you're having a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing many of you in our own buildings.
Thank you so much for joining us today. To support this podcast, please go follow us on your podcast platform of choice. And if you're interested in knowing more about the work of Peachtree, please go visit our website at peachtreelearningcenter.com for more information.